Welcome everyone, Costini here with my campaign overview guide for Yuan, the Jade Dragon, who has a dual campaign start similar to Elfarion and also Malice Darkblade. And like both Elfarion and Malice Darkblade, he is an incredibly powerful Legendary Lord who could be potentially weighed down by the dual start. Now, to be clear, in Yuan's campaign, you don't have to care about Cathay at all. Though it would still be very beneficial if you do care about Cathay, because there's a lot of things to be gained from it. Now, in terms of your short campaign victory condition, you do need to construct 2 of the 4 astromatic relay buildings. And for the long campaign victory condition, you do need to construct all of them. Now, the campaign victory conditions and the benefits they give you aren't necessarily so significant. Cathay doesn't really have that much of an issue when we're thinking about hero capacity. Well, it kind of does for astromancers, but not for alchemists. You can get a significant number of alchemists in your campaign fairly easily. And even for astromancers, there are quite a few things you can do in order to increase capacity. So Yuan can get 2 hero capacity through his special skill line. Now, looking at his Lord effects and his special skill line, he has the same trading benefit as the High Elves do. So if you start trading with the faction, then you will gain vision with that particular faction, granting you some fairly sweet benefits that you can utilize in your campaign. So for instance, I got the trade agreement over there with Xiaoming. Obviously, that is something I can use to my advantage. Also, I can just go to Hexoatl and declare war on the Keepers of Bliss for quite a bit of early game money. But I'll talk about individual steps that you should take quickly, shortly thereafter. Diplomatic relations, you get 20 diplomatic relations with Cathay. You get 5% research for each provincial capital. It's not each province, it's each provincial capital. So the fact that you start with 2 provincial capitals from the very beginning of the campaign means that you already have 10% research rate from the very beginning. And the more provinces you take, the better off you will be. And then, yeah, you can get hero capacity +2 for astromancers, which is increased by an additional +2 for his special skill line. Now, Yuan does start with the Jade Lion, Onyx Crowman, Jade Warriors, and an Alchemist, also great Langma Riders. Well, I guess he is going to be part of the Xiaoming Club in that respect. Not going to go into too many details. He does get the -30% upkeep for Onyx Crowman and, crucially, Jade and Jet Lions. Now, when we're thinking about the Jade and Jet Lions, just to talk about them very quickly, they're certainly decent enough single-entity units. They're not the best in the world, but for a tier 3 unit, they're certainly really solid. And quite crucially, they are very cheap. So you can make an entire stack of these guys for an extremely low cost in your campaign if you're playing as Yuan, or multiple stacks. They are quite effective in battle. They're very strong damage dealers. The only downside of the Jade and Jet Lions, if we're looking at them, is they don't have... sadly enough, they do not have siege attacker. But outside of that, they are they are both fairly strong units, and they give Cathay a much needed boost towards their melee roster. Because Jade Warriors are great at holding the line, they're not so great at doing damage. And the only units they have in terms of melee potential that can do damage in a campaign are not even the Celestial Dragon Guard. The Celestial Dragon Guard are similarly line holders. The only units you really have are the Terracotta Sentinels. So Jade and Jet Lions give you that much needed boost to melee ability. Cathay is pretty good even without the Shadows of Change DLC, especially given the Harmony changes, but the Jade and Jet Lions do give them more flexibility in their campaign. Now, and he gets a Winds of Magic Power Reserve capacity. You can use more magic. Though he's not necessarily going to have the best magic in the world, because he only starts with the Jade's Shield and Shem's Burning Gaze. And if we're looking at his magical skill line, there isn't necessarily a whole lot that you would actually want over here. Well, the Comet, Cassandra, but like when you're playing on Bow, you don't want to bother with the magical skill line. Rather, you would want to make use of your spellcasters, of which Cathay has many. instead, with Yuan Bo, you want to focus on building up his army, so you want to get sure aim, you want to get unyielding, or you might want to just give him an entire army of, Jade and Lion, so going for Stone Gaze might actually be the choice as opposed to going with Unyielding. Unyielding is good, don't get me wrong on that, but 6 melee attack and 6 melee defense for these units when you can just ignore those units completely and just go for the Lions is perhaps not so important. Now, in terms of a special skill line, at rank 12, you can get Lord Recruit rank +5 for Dragon-Blooded Shoguns. Faction-wide, minus 20% cooldown to spells, his entire army, and a Hero Recruit rank +5 for Astromancers, so you can get some very high-ranking Astromancers. And yes, he can really benefit from the high ranks that he can get with the Dragon-Blooded Shoguns. Furthermore, he gets a +5 control in his local province. That's not really too important, but he does get the construction cost of minus 10% for all buildings faction-wide, and minus 33% construction time for all buildings in the local region. He gets diplomatic relations +25 with humans and high elves, and a leadership aura effect. Then he also gets a similar benefit that Morathi has, though his zone is kind of a bit more ridiculous than Morathi's. Like, Morathi's ridiculous because she gets minus 30% upkeep for her army. You get minus 30% when in your own territory, but you also get 30% plus 30% campaign movement range and 5% casualty replenishment when you're in your territory. And then, yes, hero capacity for Astromancer, spell resistance, and you also get spell intensity benefit, which isn't necessarily too significant. Well, it can be, because he also gets the ability of Judge, Jury, and Executioner. He is Judge Dredd, really, because he gets the Executioner ability they can then improve with Judge and Jury and Executioner. So you can get up to 3 uses on this ability, so you can eliminate enemy lords, you can eliminate enemy heroes in battle. Like, you really want to go with the melee skill line for him because of that ability alone. Not so much his magic trait, I would argue. Okay, so that's his skill line. Beyond that, he gets the Matters of State mechanic, and the Matters of State is really where all the power is. Like, alone his skill line and faction effects would make him really strong, but when you add Matters of State, he ends up being ridiculous. Like, he starts with 2 steel tokens and stone tokens. To increase the tokens, you need to get up to 2 commercial districts to get to 4. Stone actions, stone tokens, and 2 fortress cities to get 4 steel actions. Now, whenever you use an action in stone, for instance, whenever you use token in stone, they'll start getting transferred over in steel. So if you want to use Meteor Gambit to reset the campaign movement range of all of your armies, then what you do is you get up to 4 steel tokens, and then you need to convert 3 stone tokens into steel tokens. That's pretty easy to deal with. The tokens replenish each of them after 5 turns, but fighting battles will reduce the cooldown timer by 1 turn. And the power that he does have is ridiculous. Here's what I'd recommend you do with it. You do start with 3 settlements. Now, although the Isle of the Prince's Call and the Floating Pyramid have absolutely nothing in them, but here's what you want to do. Instantly construct the Floating Pyramid. The reason you want to do so, and you get the training camp for Jade Warriors. Now, the reason you want to do so is there are 3 orc armies over here. There's one here that you can eliminate very, very quickly. There's another here, and then a third one in Fox. So if you instantly construct the Floating Pyramid, that way you can then prevent the AI from instantly taking the settlement, because when you're constructing it, it will instantly have a tier 1 garrison. And so the greenskins will be less willing to attack it, the army over there, though it's quite likely that they will. Now, this is accounting for legendary. One of the things you want to do, by the way, with this initial battle, I'd recommend actually auto-resolving this particular battle and getting the treasury. Now, the reason you want to auto-resolve that particular battle is because if and gain campaign movement range, because what you want to do is be enough in range to entice these greenskins to attack you. So if you've taken some damage over here, as opposed to manually fighting this battle, they will attack you. Even with all the damage that I just took over there, it should be enough to entice these greenskins to attack, and they have the movement range, just enough movement range to attack you. So if you can eliminate both these armies on turn 2, that will certainly give you a significant advantage. You want to use the Great Bastion, Cathay, and Compass, or if you are willing to fight a lot of battles manually, you could go for Celestial Lake, though I'd probably recommend going for the Great Bastion early on anyway, because, hey, Ancestral Warriors and Cathay in own regions is pretty strong. And what you'll want to do in Lustria is you want to eliminate these greensins. So you take out this army, you start recruiting Jade Warriors, you take the High Sentinel, you march over here to the north. Although you might want to stop over here and take the Skaven settlement to make an alliance with Marcus Wolfhard, because Marcus Wolfhard starts a war with the Skaven over here. So if you can get that agreement, the Skaven have absolutely nothing. So if you can get that agreement with Marcus Wolfhard, he'll protect your southern flank early on, because you have a date with Mazdamundi that you want to deal with. So that's just turn 1 in Lustria. You might want to just go over here on Marcus Wolfhard even before fighting the battles over here to declare war on the Skaven. It's not about the money, it's about the alliance. Or you could decide to fight Marcus Wolfhard, though it is good to have at least one ally in Lustria, I would argue, considering you've got Rakarth, you've got the Dark Elves over there. Now, in Lustria, you need to take over the following. You need to take over these settlements. You need to take over Hexawatl, so that means dealing with Mazdamundi. You need to take the Great Turtle Isle, so that means dealing with Rakarth. And beyond that, well, you need to take the Star Tower, which is controlled by Skaven. And where is the final one? Hold on a second. So the Great Turtle Isle, you want to deal with the Broken Lands, okay, in the Southern Sentinel. So you need to take out the Southern Sentinels. So you're basically going to be fighting everything. You don't need to fight the Lizardmen, with the exception of Mazdamun. Like, you can avoid the war with Gorak if you so desire, but you just need to take the Southern Settlements. Skrulk will take those. Southern Settlements, Star Tower, deal with Rakarth, and deal with Mazdamundi. Those are your objectives. It's certainly going to be a long journey, and the way you want to handle this is you want to go eliminate Mazdamundi. He is potentially going to be a hard battle. Like, the hardest battle I fought in a Yuan Bo campaign in Lustria was actually against Mazdamundi, because he threw 2 full stacks against me. I was able to win, but it certainly was a tricky one. But if you move fast, and remember, you have instant recruitment over here. You don't necessarily need it for Yuan Bo. I would use that more in Cathay. But Yuan Bo is certainly capable of dealing with Mazdamundi, dealing with Skaggi, conquering this entire territory, and then making some kind of deal with either Astankia or making a deal with Morathi. Just wait to see who's going to end up on top. Maybe take some territory over here in the Ashen Coast, sell it to whoever is going to win between Morathi and Astankia. And ideally Astankia, because that way you avoid a major war with the High Elves that could take place. Like, if you ally Morathi, then guess who's going to be pissed off at you, and that's Ulfuan. So if you can eliminate Morathi by allying Astankia, that would be beneficial, because you can avoid getting entangled in the affairs in the north when you have everything in the south to deal with. Your objective is to conquer Lustria. Like, once you've dealt with Mazdamundi, I would just march my armies over here on the coast, go conquer Rakarth. The territory he has is not great, though it is split to our jungle, so that's good, but the Temperate Island is not great. But I would conquer along the coast, go through the desert, and come up from the south over here. That way you avoid getting entangled with Gorak. Or you could split your armies, make multiple armies. Like, one could go deal with Alberg if you so desire, or you can ally Alberic, that is also a decision. I would not necessarily advance for the middle of Lustria, because that could create its own problems. And besides, the objectives, like you can just take them going along the coast. Keep in mind that the only faction that can use the underway here are the Skaven. I mean, there's the dwarves, but they're also going to be wiped out very, very quickly over here in campaign. Just be aware of the vulnerability of your territory in the Copper Desert when you make your way over here. And if you end up in a war with Tenowin, be concerned about Oxiatl potentially coming in to ruin your day. Although you could just go take the Copper Desert and then just march for the mountains. And if Scroll controls the Southern Sentinels, wipe him out. If Tenowin is still alive, you may end up having to fight him. You don't necessarily need to fight the Lizardmen, but it is likely going to happen. Well, with the exception of Mazdamundi. Now, what should you do in Cathay? That is a pretty good question. Well, here's what I'd argue. In Cathay, from turn 1, you have Shangwu. And the Vampire Counts faction over here, the Jiangxi rebels, they're no match for you. So what I would do over here is I would recruit a Yang Lord. Now, the reason you'd recruit a Yang Lord is because the season trackers benefit for campaign movement range. And with this Yang Lord, here's what I would do here very, very quickly. Let's go for character leadership. Start global recruiting, manually recruiting, and then use matters of state to levy the provinces over here. And start making, and that way with global recruitment you can get a lot of units. Yes, it will cost a significant amount of money, and money can potentially be an issue early on in this particular campaign. If you move quickly enough, like the vampires will certainly be wiped out, but if you move quickly enough, you could potentially avoid getting entangled in a war. You can potentially avoid getting losing the Celestial Riverlands, for instance, the Burning Wind Nomads, who do start with an army over here under Young Sun and another one under Min C. There's also a third one, so they have some distance to cover before they get to the Celestial Riverlands. And a combination of peasant archers and Jade warriors will be sufficient to deal with the vampires. Eventually, you do want to get Jade warrior crossbowmen. If you're using, I would recommend the Warband upgrade mod to eventually upgrade these peasant archers into Jade warrior crossbowmen. And then you have a choice. Like, you can play a defensive-oriented campaign over here, or you go to the Baleful Hills, you take the Bridge of Heaven. You should be able to out-resolve with ease the entire army over here that they have. They'll just have zombies and skeletons, right? Like, if you look at the buildings they have, they can only get direwolves and fellbats. They have nothing. They won't throw Graveguard or any of the higher tier stuff. The concern over here in Cathay is that Snitch and Lokir will prove to be a challenge. And the best thing you can do in this campaign is confederate all of Cathay. Now, how do you manage that? Well, Xiaoming is going to be the trickiest of the bunch, because he's always going to take those two provinces. But if you can go after Snitch quickly enough before Miaoying and Xiaoming do take him out, because they will fight him, if you can take out Snitch quickly enough, then you can prevent Xiaoming and Miaoying from becoming too powerful. The Imperial Wardens should be an easy Confederation target if you can get vision with them, which you, again, should be able to because of your trading benefit. The Imperial Wardens should be easy enough to confederate, though whether or not you want to confederate or let the Great Bastion fall to put pressure under Miaoying is a different discussion. The best way to confederate the faction is to ally them, but also let them lose a lot. But be careful here, because obviously it is a secondary army and Snitch is not a joke. I would strongly recommend getting a Celestial General, because he might hold his own to a certain degree against Snitch. And I would also dump literally every item, unless you absolutely need them against Mazdamundi, should be dumped into the Celestial General. Now, you are the closest to Snitch, so you can try and rush him. And remember a couple of things about Snitch. Snitch's economy is tied heavily, and unit recruitment is tied heavily to Sing Po. If you take Sing Po, you neuter a lot of Snitch's potential. So he'll still have clan rats and Skaven slaves, but that's all he'll be able to recruit. Now, the key to fighting Skaven is to never allow yourself to be ambushed. If you can have a straight-up field battle against the Skaven and corner camp and all that, unless Snitch throws free-full armies against you, which he can, make no mistake on that. That's a lesson that I'm sure a lot of people have learned dealing with Skaven. Never underestimate their potential of throwing a lot of armies your way. But if you can defeat Snitch's armies individually, you might be able to win. Be concerned about Snitch. Snitch himself can tear up your army in half very easily on his own. The situation you want to avoid is where you get damaged. So while it does take quite a few turns to cover this territory, never ever go in forced march. And ideally, you always go in camp stance, especially if you only have one army in this territory. Though you ideally would want to get 2 armies over here in Cathay, because another one will be needed to deal with Lokir. Lokir is the easier of the 2 threats. Like, Snitch's army might be weaker than Lokir's, but Snitch himself is far stronger. So you'd want to have 2 armies in Lustria early on, and then you would want to have 2 armies in Cathay. What you decide to do after that is up to you, like how much you want to fight Village, how much you want to expand in Cathay, that's a different discussion. Keep in mind, there is an alternative to all of this. You can give up Shangwu, conquer portions of Lustria, and then just use the sea lanes to send armies over here. Like, you can literally send Yan Bo to help things out. Like, the sea lane is over here, and you can just, once you've finished the Mazamundi and pacified the situation, you can just sail an army over here and just go show up on Lokir's unprotected capital with Yan Bo and wipe him out. So that is an option. I personally think that giving up Shangwu is a really bad decision in a campaign, especially because you can certainly take the entirety of the Celestial Riverlands. And even if you decide not to do anything about Snitch, because he is going to end up in a war with Xiaoming and Miaoying regardless, even if you decide not to take the risk that fighting Snitch involves, you can still hold on to Celestial Riverlands and use it as your breadbasket if you so desire. The Jade Custodians in Cathay are certainly going to be wiped out by either Snitch or Lokir, or both. And Miaoying will put some pressure on Snitch. Xiaoming certainly will put pressure on Snitch. Xiaoming's AI behavior is that he takes these 2 provinces, at least on Legendary very hard. He takes these 2 provinces and then he likely declares war on Snitch. And if you have a good relation with Xiaoming and Snitch declares war on you, that's even more likely. You might be put on the defensive into the Celestial Riverlands, or if you want to be very aggressive, you can go conquer the entirety of the Forest of the Moon. Take the diamond mine over here. Yes, it is a mountain, so it's not ideal, but you can then take Celestial River Lake, and if you're feeling confident enough in the ability of your army over here to deal with Lokir and to deal with everything he has, then you can take over everything here. You might even be able to confederate the Jade Custodians here, because like when you're playing Yan Bo, they don't have Shangwu, so they only have the Nangchang Basin and Celestial Lake, and those are prime targets for both Snitch and Lokir to deal with. Though with Snitch, if you can, you should try and strike him as quickly as possible. Though you shouldn't ignore the vampires. If you let the vampires build up, there'll be an issue, though a minor one. If you could strike Snitch as quickly as possible, that might work. But a bunch of peasant archers and Jade warriors are not going to cut until you build a full stack of them. One particular thing I would strongly recommend over here is getting Yang to be able to recruit more units quickly. It quickly can be beneficial, but don't ignore Harmony. Like, either go Yang or go Harmony early on. I prefer going with Harmony because it allows me to traverse this vast territory, or this decently sized territory quicker and take the territory quicker. But Yang for unit recruitment is certainly very beneficial. Something to also keep in mind over here in the swamps. Keep in mind, you do start with only tier 1 settlements, and growth is going to take a while, especially because there's 2 ports over here, and, well, you do need a training camp for Jade warriors. And that would be about it about Yan Bo, just some of the basics of his campaign. He's certainly very powerful, but he also has a lot of campaign potential if you work for it. And he's a legendary lord that deals with 3 other legendary lords pretty quickly in his campaign. So you're thinking Mazda Mundi, you're thinking Snitch, you're thinking Lokir, and that is the most ideal way to play Yuan Bo. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.